In the Picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde crafts a deeply layered narrative that delves into the complexities of beauty, moral corruption, and the dual nature of human identity. The story opens in Victorian London, where the talented and idealistic artist Basil Hallward becomes captivated by the young Dorian Gray, who embodies the essence of beauty and purity. Basil sees Dorian as his muse and believes that Dorian's beauty brings out his best artistic qualities. He begins painting a portrait that he feels captures Dorian's flawless, youthful beauty, considering it his finest work. During a session at Basil's studio, Dorian meets Basil's friend Lord Henry Wotton, a hedonistic aristocrat whose worldview is steeped in cynicism and the pursuit of pleasure. Lord Henry's philosophy revolves around self-indulgence and living for the moment, dismissing conventional notions of morality. He tells Dorian that youth and beauty are the only things worth possessing because they are fleeting. Deeply influenced by Lord Henry's words, Dorian fears the inevitability of aging and loss of beauty. In a moment of passion, he impulsively wishes that he could remain young forever, while the portrait bears the burden of time and experience. This wish, though made in a moment of vanity and innocence, seals Dorian's fate. As Dorian begins to lead a life of self-gratification, he discovers that his wish has been granted in a disturbing way. The painting, not he, ages and shows the effects of every sin he commits. Each act of cruelty, selfishness, or indulgence etches itself onto the portrait, twisting and corrupting it, while Dorian's physical appearance remains pristine. This supernatural phenomenon allows Dorian to live a life free of visible consequences. Emboldened, he increasingly adopts Lord Henry's philosophy, pursuing a lifestyle of decadence and vice. He frequents opium dens, manipulates people for his own amusement, and destroys lives without a hint of remorse. A key turning point in the novel is Dorian's relationship with Sybil Vane, a young, talented actress whom he briefly falls in love with for her beauty and artistic skill. Dorian's affection is shallow. He is enchanted not by her as a person, but by her portrayal of romantic heroines on stage. When she performs poorly one night due to her genuine love for him, Dorian feels betrayed and cruelly dismisses her, causing her to commit suicide. While initially shocked by her death, Dorian quickly rationalizes it under Lord Henry's influence, viewing it as an aesthetically tragic event rather than a moral failing. This marks his first major step into moral corruption, and when he later examines the portrait, he sees a slight, cruel twist to his own image, indicating that his soul is beginning to suffer the consequences he escapes in his physical life. Over the years, Dorian's life becomes a continuous spiral of indulgence. Rumors spread about his character and mysterious influence over others, yet his youthful looks shield him from suspicion. Those who knew him as a young man are baffled by his unchanging appearance, while he grows increasingly paranoid and isolated. The portrait, now hidden in an attic, becomes grotesque, symbolizing the corruption of his soul. Haunted by this visible record of his sins, Dorian tries to forget his guilt. But the image in the portrait constantly reminds him of the life he has wasted and the people he has hurt. Dorian's descent reaches its climax when Basil, unaware of the full extent of Dorian's corruption, confronts him and expresses concern about the rumors surrounding him. In a moment of uncharacteristic remorse, Dorian reveals the portrait to Basil, who is horrified by the monstrous image that was once his masterpiece. Realizing the depth of Dorian's degradation, Basil implores him to repent, but instead of feeling gratitude or remorse, Dorian feels resentment and anger. In a sudden outburst of violence, he murders Basil, further cementing his descent into depravity. Though he continues his hedonistic pursuits, Dorian becomes increasingly troubled by his actions. He attempts to reform, believing that a single act of kindness might undo his sins. However, he quickly realizes that his motivations are still selfish. He is not truly remorseful, but rather hopes to cleanse himself of guilt without sacrificing pleasure. His attempt at redemption fails, and he remains haunted by his dark past. In the novel's climactic scene, Dorian, in a final desperate attempt to free himself from his guilt, takes a knife to the portrait, hoping that destroying it will sever his connection to his corrupt past. However, this act of violence backfires. By stabbing the portrait, he effectively destroys himself. His servants later find his body, now aged and hideously deformed, while the portrait has reverted to its original, untainted beauty.